UFC 275 is almost here. I'm going to give you my final picks. We're going to talk about some props that we like, and we're going to build some lineups, so make sure you watch until the end. You can call me Kunith. Let's make some money this week. I can tell you straight away, I'm excited to build lineups today, and we're going to do that toward the end of the video after we go over some value plays and some changes that have come to the card, but I'm pumped. Now, this card only has 11 fights for us to work with because we lost the Manel, Kape, Rogerio, Bontorin fight. Bontorin had a bad weight cut. As a result, we lose that fight, which sucks, and it sucks because I wanted to fade Manel Kape on the basis that he's probably not going to pay off his salary, but now we're looking at a situation where we only have 11 fights left. Now, with the remaining fights, everybody's made weight, and we still have a lot of fun matchups on our hands and a lot of good ones to target from a DraftKings perspective. And I say good ones because there's a lot of close fights with high finishing upside that we have this week, and it looks like a week where a lot of dogs can win. It might be an all dogs go to heaven kind of week. That's kind of the consensus out there. And while I don't agree with all of them, there are a couple of dog spots that I really like this week, some good value plays on this card that I'm going to get into in just a second. But before I do, I want to talk a little bit about what we have this week with this slate and only 11 fights to work with. Again, we have a ton of close fights that we have on our hands. So if we have 11 fights to work with, how many locks are there really? In my opinion, there's only one in Valentina Shevchenko. You have to have the bullet in your lineups, whether you're playing cash, tournaments. She has the upside, she has the high ceiling, she has the high floor. You're going to need her this week, and that's the only lock that I see. So if you plug her into your lineups and you're filling the other 5 roster spots, you have 20 fighters to work with to do that. 20 fighters equals 10 fights. 10 fights equal 5 possible outcomes that you need to get correct. And I'll tell you right now, this more than maybe ever before is going to ring true this week. Hear me when I say this. Salary is not going to matter. The lineup that wins the big contest, the lineup that might win some of your smaller field stuff, if you're playing, say, single entry and 3 max, they're going to be leaving a lot on the table, and it's because there's some good value this week. So with that, we'll get into the value plays starting at 7,900 with Kyung Ho Kang. He's going to be fighting Danaa Batgerel this week, and I see him winning this fight because he has more tools to work with. Danaa Batgerel swings with everything he's got in his punches, so when it works, it looks great. He looks like a destroyer, and when it doesn't work, he looks like he should be outside of a car dealership. And that's kind of what we saw with his last fight against Chris Gutierrez, where he was just swinging wildly, missing big, and ultimately got countered and knocked out. In this matchup, I expect Kyung Ho Kang to stay competitive on the feet and find several takedowns over the 15 minutes. And for Kang, if he secures 2 or more takedowns in the first round, I could see him having a sizable cardio advantage the later that this fight goes. I don't see Batgerel having a great gas tank here, especially if he's forced to wrestle defensively, and obviously he's a threat for the knockout with his style, but I do prefer the grappler in this matchup to implement a good game plan, soften Batgerel up with ground and pound, ultimately find the submission. There's good value here at 7,900. I do expect him to be a popular play this week just because of his scoring ceiling. We have seen him post decent scores in the past, but I also expect a lot of the underdogs to be popular this week, which might spread out the ownership a little bit. So 7,900 Kyung Ho Kang, very good value. Our next value play is $7,600 Na Liang or Liang Na. I thought I was big brain with this one early in the week. I was looking at this slate thinking, wow, Na Liang is going to be sneaky value this week, but based on the consensus out there, I was dead wrong. It looks like everyone and their mother is going to be rostering her in their lineups this week, and it's because it makes a ton of sense. Silvana Gomez Juarez can't grapple, she's 12 years older, and she's susceptible to the armbar. The matchmakers know what they're doing with this matchup. They know what they're doing by putting Liang on the Singapore card, and from a UFC's perspective, they probably want her to win this fight. This is a fight for her to win. This is a favorable matchup. I expect her to get takedowns in this fight and eventually find the submission, most likely by way of armbar. So when you take into account the wrestling plus the finishing upside, she's probably going to post a high DraftKings score this week. Again, she probably comes in at really high ownership, but it's worth it at this price and with this matchup. Good value here at 7,600. Now at 7,500, our next value play is literally just Na Liang that nobody's going to roster. She has a favorable matchup as well, and she's in a similar position than what we just talked about. Her opponent, Jocelyn Edwards, can't grapple, and everybody knows it. Jocelyn Edwards gave up 9 takedowns and 23 minutes of control time when you combine her last 2 fights. So the path to victory is very clear, very obvious, and against a fighter like Edwards, who doesn't really have great physical strength and relies exclusively on her striking, this is a good spot for Pascual. This also, to me, represents a good bounce back spot. We've been talking about this a lot recently where fighters come in, drop their debut, give a good account of themselves, and then they come back much stronger. She made her UFC debut against Josie Nunes, who's better than Edwards everywhere. She packs a crazy punch. She got knocked down multiple times in that fight, but she showed awesome toughness, and she fought hard for the whole 15 minutes. So to me, a performance like that against one of the tougher matchups in the division is a good learning experience and something that she could really build off of. So I expect her to win this fight, and her scoring ceiling is actually crazy high when you consider what Jocelyn Edwards has looked like lately. We touched on this with the predictions video earlier in the week. If you haven't watched that, that will be linked right in the top of the description. But Jocelyn Edwards has given up high scores to both Jessica Rose Clark and Carol Hoza. She could do the same thing here. And Ramona Pascual is probably going to come in around 10% ownership in most of your contests, while Na Liang is going to come in anywhere between 30 to 40% if I have to guess, and they're both in very similar situations. If anything, I think the matchup for Pascual might be a little bit better because she'll be able to eat more shots than Na Liang will, and that makes her sneaky value this week where you can get some real solid leverage against the field. So give me Ramona Pascual at 7,500. Excellent value. Our next value play is Glover Teixeira at 7,300. Of course, people are going to get here. He's very cheap this week. He's in the main event. He has 5 rounds to work with, and he does have the tools to win this fight. I personally still think that Jiri Prochazka wins this fight inside the first or second round, but we can't ignore the value here on the champion at 7,300. Glover is one of the best grapplers the division has ever seen. In my opinion, it goes John Jones number 1, DC number 2, and then Glover Teixeira right there at number 3. And one thing that surprised me about Glover is how he got Jan Blachowicz down in the title fight last year. Specifically how he got him down in the first round. He got Jan Blachowicz up against the fence and he secured a double leg takedown, which on the surface doesn't sound that impressive. But the crazy part is Glover didn't connect his hands when he got the double leg. Most fighters, when they get their opponent against the cage, they work to get their hands together, and once they're able to get the grip, they can lift and secure the takedown. But Glover didn't need to do that. He changed levels, he got his arms around, and he just lifted Jan Blachowicz's legs like they were two separate things, like he was carrying 2 paper grocery bags. And from there, he was able to get him off his feet, change his angle, and get the fight to the mat. And that just goes to show how intelligent and physically strong Glover is in the clinch, and that's really what worries me. So if Glover wins, it's on the basis of his wrestling, and he's likely to find a submission if this fight does stay on the mat for too long. And if he's smart, which he is, he's going to spend as little time at range as possible and shoot for the takedown right away. But my issue with him this week is just the danger that's on the other side. Jiri Prochazka sends dudes to a place where time doesn't exist. In his 2 UFC fights, he's not TKOing people. Once the ref steps in, there's no protest from his opponents because they're busy looking at memories from their childhood while the ringside physician's trying to slap him awake. His mix of speed, power, tenacity, and awkwardness make him someone I do not want to bet against anytime soon, but if anybody's going to beat him, it's probably old man Glover. So of course, if he wins, there's good value here at 7,300. I still prefer the challenger in this spot. I think we're going to see some and new, but I had to touch on the champ, have to show him a little bit of respect because there is a pretty clear path to victory for him. We even saw Dominic Reyes get Jiri Prochazka down. That is a cause for concern. And I have one more value play for you, one more, and this is going to be the one that some of you hate. But I'm telling you now, Jacob Malkoun gets it done this week while going way under-owned. He's going to go under-owned because he's underrated, or maybe because Brendan Allen is a little overrated. Who has a bad chin? Jacob Malkoun, maybe. Who else has a bad chin? Brendan Allen. Allen was knocked out by Sean Strickland, who has crazy hands, but he isn't a knockout artist by any stretch. And he was knocked out by Chris Curtis, who was stepping in on short notice, where Brendan Allen was a massive favorite. And while Allen beat Sam Alvey in his last fight, obviously we took him to win that fight, he did get stung early by Sam Alvey, and that's just a cause for concern. So on the feet, I do give the slight edge technique-wise to Brendan Allen, but I don't think that he's going to kill Malkoun when this fight is fought at range. I could actually see Malkoun having some success on the feet as well if he's able to land. But obviously the big difference maker here is the wrestling. Jacob Malkoun, as you can see on the screen, dominated in his last 2 fights with his wrestling, posted excellent Draftkings scores in both of them, and I could see him doing that again here. Brendan Allen has a 50% takedown defense, and we know that Malkoun is willing to shoot for 20 takedowns and not get tired, so obviously he's going to get him to the ground at some point if he isn't knocked out right away. And that 50% takedown defense doesn't really tell the whole story because everybody that's wanted to get Brendan Allen down has done it, including Kevin Holland, who went 1 of 1 with his takedowns a couple years ago. From a wrestling standpoint, Jacob Malkoun is probably the best wrestler that Allen is going to have faced, and I think that's going to show here. And don't let the submissions on the record of Brendan Allen fool you. All but one of them are from a dominant position on top. He has one triangle choke off his back in LFA against Chris Harris, who, if you watch that fight, does nothing to defend it. He actually gets caught with it, somehow gets out of it after doing virtually nothing, and then just stays in the same position, and Brendan Allen's able to get it again. So don't think that he is going to be able to throw something up off his back and catch Jacob Malkoun. It's probably not going to happen that way. So I say that to say this: he's probably not going to get a submission unless he is able to take the back of Jacob Malkoun or end up on top, and I don't think that's going to happen. I think the top pressure is going to belong to the Aussie here, and he's going to get it done, and he's incredible value down at this price. And I don't see any value below his price. So that does it for the value plays. Now we can build some lineups. If you haven't already, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, because if you subscribe, it's good luck, and if you watch the video and you're not subscribed, it's bad luck. And comment something for the algorithm, because what the algorithm does, well, you know how the algorithm works. But now we can get into building some lineups. So again, we're going to follow our rule that we set out from the beginning of the week. This is a free square. Just plug in Valentina Shevchenko no matter what kind of contest you're in. I'll start with what I think a cash game lineup should look like for you. I don't know if I'll post the cash game lineup on Twitter this week. Let me know if I should, but I might hold off on that this week. But in cash games, you're probably looking at a situation where you play Valentina, then you come down here and you start looking for some value. I'll actually start with somebody that I changed my mind with throughout the week. I'm going to go with Della Maddalena to get it done. Earlier in the week, I took Ramazan Emeev to win just on the basis of his grappling, the experience. He's not really somebody to get knocked out, but when you start looking through his UFC career, and before his UFC career, it's cans, largely. But when you start looking at his UFC career, on this whole list, I mean, this is relatively soft matchmaking since 2017, and I actually think that Della Maddalena beats everybody on this list. I think he beats Ramazan Emeev as well. If he is the real deal, like a lot of us think that he is, then he should have no problem getting it done this week. He's got the much cleaner hands. He's going to land with a lot more power. And if he's able to stuff a couple of takedowns, Emeev showed in his last fight that the gas tank is kind of leaving him at this point, and he is hittable. So give me Della Maddalena this week. I think he's one of the more safer plays on the card. Just after reviewing this closer, I think that he's going to piece him up. Again, I really like Na Liang this week. I just like the grappling advantage that she has. I could say the same thing about Kyung Ho Kang. If we come up here, you could grab somebody like, for example, Jiri Prochazka for the knockout upside. So now you're left with Maheshate. You could play Jake Matthews if you think he's going to be able to grind out a decision win. I know that's a pretty popular take out there on the basis of his grappling as well. It's just hard for me to want to bet against Andre Fialho. You could go with Ramona Pascual in this kind of lineup. You left 300 salary on the table. You're targeting the main event, the co-main event. You've got some pretty favorable matchups here with Della Maddalena, Pascual. You've got Liang. You're worried that Kang gets knocked out, but he's not really the type to get knocked out. The last time he was knocked out was in 2008, so it's been a while. So you're looking at grappling upside, grappling upside, grappling upside, knockout upside, and the best fighter on the planet. So I think this is probably what you do in cash. If you are a little worried about Prochazka, you can come off of him and you can get up to somebody like Seung-Woo Choi. Just don't be surprised if he doesn't post the best score this week. Josh Culiabo is very tough. Seung-Woo Choi is primarily a striker, so this might go the distance. He might not score that well. If you want a little bit more bang for your buck, you can come down here to Andre Fialho. You've left 700 salary on the table, but again, salary matters very little this week. This is probably the route that you end up going in your cash games. I might post the cash game lineup on Twitter like I normally do, but I don't know. We'll see. Now, what I think you'll see a lot of in your tournaments is probably somebody going with Shevchenko. They're probably going to get Jiri Prochazka. I think that they'll probably come to Na Liang as well. I expect Joanna to be a pretty popular play this week. I expect Kang to be a pretty popular play this week. And then people will come up to Andre Fialho. I do think that Glover will carry a good amount of ownership as well in tournaments. So if we take out Prochazka, switch him with Glover Teixeira, not many people are going to be leaving 1,700 on the table. So when you're looking at this, you want to attack as much upside as possible. You'll probably see them come off of Joanna and then come up here to Seung-Woo Choi. If they don't want to spend every drop of that salary, they might go down here to Brendan Allen, or they might even come off of Brendan Allen, grab somebody like Zhang Weili, and that leaves about 300 salary on the table. And this is a lineup that somebody would make if they probably wanted to be a bit safer this week. Obviously, you're taking a chance with Glover Teixeira, but in this lineup, you're really only playing 2 underdogs, and Na Liang, by the time Locke comes around, is probably going to be the favorite in her matchup. Same thing might be said for Kyung Ho Kang. You see money continuing to come in on them. If we came off of Teixeira, went back up to Prochazka, we have to make up some room here with the salary and see how that works out. So if we took out Zhang Weili, for example, and we came down to Steve Garcia, who might carry a decent amount of ownership, we still need to save some money here, and I think there are certain ways that we can do that. We can come off of Andre Fialho. You can come down here to get somebody like Ramona Pascual at 7,500. You can come to Joanna or Jedrzejczyk here, and then I think some of us are also going to be looking to play Jacob Malkoun down here at 7,200. Now, if you wanted something really off the wall, you can blow this all up. You come up here, get the free square that is Valentina Shevchenko, come down here to Malkoun, you come down here to Glover. Now you can do basically anything you want. If you want to come up here and grab Kyung Ho Kang, you can do that. You can get Jack Della Maddalena, and then you can afford any fighter here and still leave money on the table. So if you wanted to come up to Seung-Woo Choi, just hoping that the $9,100 fighter gets it done, that makes sense. 700 left on the table. That's pretty different. You're not playing Jiri Prochazka. I think this is a good way to attack your tournaments if you wanted to. If you wanted to come off of Kyung Ho Kang, you could still come up to Andre Fialho. You're not leaving as much on the table, but you're not playing Jiri Prochazka. This might be a good way for you to get different as well. If you're not sold on the Jack Della Maddalena pick, then of course you can come back to Kyung Ho Kang. You've left 400 salary on the table. That's a smart way to approach it as well. And now with 400 left on the table, let's say you weren't sold on Jacob Malkoun and you wanted to go the other way with Brendan Allen, well then you would just come down from Seung-Woo Choi, and then you can still grab somebody like Na Liang. This is a way that you could approach it also. Either way, I think that you have to play Valentina Shevchenko, and you have to find those other 5 fights that make sense. Which I'll do that for you now. We could take a quick look at the fights. So if we take all of the fights except for the Shevchenko fight, so we put that in there, let's see what we have. We've got Seung-Woo Choi versus Josh Culiabo. Well, that fight probably goes the distance. It's probably a striking battle. They're fighting in the bigger cage. They might go to war. They might stand in the middle and bang, but I don't think that one of them is going to go down, and I'm not convinced that Seung-Woo Choi should be as big of a favorite as he is. So if we don't attack that, we have 9 fights left to work with. Well, Brendan Allen, Jacob Malkoun, I think the winner of that fight probably posts a pretty solid score because I think that Brendan Allen could finish Malkoun. I don't expect Malkoun to lose a decision in this spot. So if he wins a decision, he probably scores a ton of points. And if he loses, it's probably inside the distance and you'll need this side. So this is a good fight to target in my opinion. Jiri Prochazka, Glover Teixeira, the winner of this fight is going to get a finish. I would be shocked if this fight goes the distance. Take the under. I think it's 3.5 rounds right now. Take the under. That makes a ton of sense. The rematch with Weili and Joanna, this is a fight that I'm not going near at all. These are not fighters that are going to get finished very easily. They only have 3 rounds to work with this time. You can take that fight out. So this is kind of narrowing it down for you. I don't expect this fight to be the one that shows up on the winning lineup. Jocelyn Edwards and Ramona Pascual, I don't see Jocelyn Edwards showing up on the winning lineup. I can see it for Pascual, however. So that narrows it down a little bit. That is a dog or pass situation with that fight. So you're left with, so far, Brendan Allen or Malkoun, Prochazka or Teixeira, and then Ramona Pascual. So Vanna Gomez-Suarez, Na Liang. Gomez-Suarez is going to come in at much lower ownership. She totally could get a knockout here and turn the slate on its head if she comes in at 7% ownership. I do prefer the other side here, but I do think that having exposure to both sides if you're playing a bunch of lineups makes sense. So that's a good fight to target. The Andre Fialho-Jake Matthews fight is a little sus to me. This is a fight that could end up going the distance. Jake Matthews historically does not score that well on DraftKings. Andre Fialho probably doesn't score many points in a decision win because he's looking to strike, and if he's winning by decision, he probably hasn't gotten a knockdown in that fight either. So I think that this is a fight that you can actually avoid, and you'll be in a good spot. I think a lot of people are going to get here, and it's going to burn a lot of people. Steve Garcia versus Maheshate. This is tough. So early in the week, I thought Steve Garcia by knockout is probably the most likely because Maheshate is super hittable, but he's got one of these chins on him. You don't often see some of these Chinese fighters get folded up. It's just not something that happens. A lot of them are very durable. I think Maheshate at 22 years old might be one of these durable prospects who can really take a beating, and I don't know if Steve Garcia is going to be able to put him away. I do like Steve Garcia to win because he has the power and he has the wrestling to turn to, but Maheshate is going to be slightly bigger. He's a better athlete. He probably has the better chin of the two, so I'm not so sold on this fight going under. I think this might go over, and this might not be a spot that you have to roster. I think you need the winner of Danaa Batgerel and Kyung Ho Kang, because if Kang wins, then he just mauled him with the grappling, scores a good amount of points in a decision win, or he finds a submission. If Batgerel wins, obviously, it's by way of knockout. So the winner of this fight is something that you probably want. I think if Della Maddalena wins, he scores a lot of points. If Emeev wins, he doesn't. Historically, he does not score well on DraftKings. So this is a Della Maddalena or pass situation, which helps narrow things down a little bit. So if I had to make a bit of a fighter pool for you to choose from, I think this is what it would look like. Fill in the remaining spots with fighters that you see here. Don't be afraid to get different. Don't be afraid to leave salary on the table. This is going to be one of those weeks where the dogs bark. The winning lineup is going to be super strange. Don't be afraid to be that strange lineup and take down your contests. And just to go through the card for you to give you my final picks for each fight, I like Jiri Prochazka by knockout. I like Valentina Shevchenko inside the distance. I like Zhang Weili by decision. I like Andre Fialho by knockout. I like Jack Della Maddalena by knockout. Seung-Woo Choi by decision. Steve Garcia by decision. Jacob Malkoun by decision. Kyung Ho Kang by sub. Na Liang by sub. Ramona Pascual by decision. In terms of round props, I would recommend targeting a lot of the overs this week. I think more than half of these fights probably go the distance. I don't think we're going to have as many finishes as we might hope on this card. So do your best to find some of the over props or the fight goes the distance lines that you really like. I think those will be good this week. And feel free to send me screenshots of your lineups on Twitter at Kunith MMA. I can give you a little bit of lineup review if you'd like. Just let me know what type of contest you're in, how many people are in these contests. That way I can give you a little bit more informed counsel, if you will. But have fun this week. Don't be afraid to be different. Don't be afraid to be weird. Thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And if you haven't already, please like the video, subscribe to the channel. That way I can bring more of this to you.